we are following this morning. Several developments out of Kenosha, Wisconsin, including new details about the 17-year-old boy arrested after shooting two people during a protest there. Two are down dead. Kyle Rittenhouse, you see him there with his weapon, charged with first-degree intentional homicide. His Facebook page showed an affinity for guns, for the police, for President Trump. Reports indicate he was part of an armed militia working, they imagined, to protect property. This is a video here that shows him walking down the street with his weapon. The police investigating it, taking moments just after the shooting to confirm whether that is indeed Rittenhouse and what happens, how did police react when they saw him there. This as CNN learns that Facebook failed to shut down a page that was encouraging citizens, just like Rittenhouse, to take to the streets, even from out of state, to Kenosha. Also raising concern this morning, comments from Kenosha's police chief seeming to defend the arrival of vigilantes in his town. Have a listen.
Everybody involved was out after the curfew. I'm not going to make a great deal of that, but the point is the curfew's in place to protect. Had persons not been out involved in violation of that, perhaps the situation that unfolded would not have happened. So the last night, a 17-year-old individual from Antioch, Illinois, was involved in the use of firearms to resolve whatever conflict was in place. The result of it was two people are dead.
To resolve whatever conflict's in place, that 17-year-old. More on that in just a moment. But first, there are also new developments in the police shooting of Jacob Blake, which got this started on Sunday. Investigators are now releasing a rough timeline of what they say happened in the moments just before Blake, who you see there with his children, was shot 8 times, his attorney says, they believe, in the back. CNN Shimon Prokupez is in Kenosha. He's following all the details. So, Shimon, what details are police releasing with this timeline here, as well as talking about a knife in the car? Tell us what picture they are painting here now.
Well, they're painting still a picture as if they don't really know all the facts and everything that occurred here. They're painting a picture where they're still trying to gather information. Ultimately, it is up to the district attorney here on whether they're going to file charges against this officer who's been identified as Rustin Shesky. That was one of the things that authorities here revealed. That was the new information. They also revealed that there was a knife, that there was this knife in the car. What's not clear, Jim, is whether this knife was used in any threatening way. That is the big question. Just because there was a knife in the car does not mean that Mr. Blake was trying to grab it, was trying to use it in any kind of a threatening way. We just don't know the answer to those questions. We know that authorities, the investigators, have talked to Mr. Blake. He admitted that he had this knife in the vehicle, so that is something that they know. We don't know if they've interviewed the officer who shot him. They would not reveal that information. The other thing that's new here is that the Department of Justice, the FBI here, have opened an investigation, a civil rights investigation that's going to work in conjunction with the local investigation. But there still are a lot of unanswered questions. Few answers that have been given don't really explain why the officer shot Mr. Blake the way he did several times in the back, Jim.
Okay, so we have what followed. The shooting, apparently, that's what he's charged with, a 17-year-old. He's now in custody. What do we know about why he was there, how local authorities are responding, but also is the Justice Department investigating the arrival of these armed militias?
Yeah, that we don't know. We don't know if the Justice Department is investigating the militia, right? We know they were on Facebook, as Facebook has admitted. They were promoting, they were encouraging people to come here with weapons to protect property that didn't even belong to them. But they were here, they were on the street. Police really couldn't do anything about it. It's an open carry state. They can walk around with their weapons as they please. So really for investigators, they need to figure out, was he encouraged in any way by this group? Did he somehow come across them on Facebook? We don't even know that, and therefore that's why he came. Did he come here on his own, or was this group somehow, did he force him to come here? Did they encourage him to come here? The other thing, Jim, is the weapon, right? He's 17 years old. It's unclear how he got that long gun. That is something that investigators want to know. Right now, he's in custody in Antioch, in Illinois. He's going to appear in court on Friday there, where they're going to have an extradition hearing. Eventually, he will be brought here, where he's going to face charges as an adult for intentional murder, Jim.
Listen, it's not the first time we've seen armed people attempt to take the law into their own hands. Shimon Prokupecz, we know you'll stay on top of it. Thanks very much. With me now is Charles Ramsey. He's CNN law enforcement analyst. He also former police chief in Philadelphia, but also here in D.C. Chief Ramsey, good to have you on here. There's a lot to talk about. It's good to have your experience. First, let's talk about, if we can, what new information police have released about the circumstances around Blake's shooting. They say, one, that they had attempted to tase him early on. That didn't work. Now they say they believe there was a knife in the car. His attorneys say, witnesses say, he never threatened the police with a knife, and his attorney denied to me yesterday there was any weapon. But that new information you've learned, coupled with what you've seen in the video, does that change at all your view of the use of deadly force by police here?
Well, first of all, the use of the taser, that's less
grave force.
The use of the taser, which is less lethal, makes sense during the struggle. For them to have used that, so that's not problematic. As far as having a knife in the car, if in fact he did have a knife, and let's just say he did have a knife, unless he had the knife in his hand and was threatening the officers and they were in immediate danger of bodily harm, then the use of deadly force would not be justified. So why he fired at the time he fired, I don't know. When you look at that video, the door of the car actually obstructs the view. So I don't know whether or not he was able to get his hands on a knife or what kind of knife. I mean, is it a pocket knife? Is it a butcher knife? I mean, what is it? I don't know. And so until we get more information, the use of deadly force in this case seems to be very questionable in my mind. But I would like to add one thing. I'm very glad they took that young man into custody that committed those 2 homicides in Kenosha. It's important that that be resolved very quickly.
I want to ask your reaction to the Kenosha police chief's comments on that, because yes, they have taken Rittenhouse into custody here, charged him, I should know, with intentional homicide. But the police chief described Rittenhouse as trying to resolve some sort of conflict there. We have video, which I believe we could show now, of other members of the police force welcoming the arrival of these armed, untrained vigilantes, giving them water, etc. Should a police chief ever defend or welcome vigilantes? I mean, in this case, even from out of state, under any circumstances?
Well, I don't know if he was actually welcoming. I certainly wouldn't. Let me put it that way. And it's unfortunate that you show police officers actually doing the same. That's just the opposite of what I would want to see, armed people. Now, I mean, who needs a 17-year-old with a long rifle who calls himself patrolling or protecting anything? I mean, come on. At what point in time do we have common sense, or any sense at all for that matter, to think that this is a good thing? It's not a good thing. People have a legal right to protest. They don't have a right to burn buildings and all that sort of thing. But protesting is a constitutional right. I mean, that hasn't changed. Sometimes it's difficult to handle and control these things. But the last thing you need are untrained people showing up heavily armed. Nothing good can possibly come from it. They're protecting property. It's not even their property. This kid's from Illinois.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. No excuse for murder at all.
It's an amazing thing to witness in this country. Charles Ramsey,
It's
good
crazy.
to have you on.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's not the first time we've seen it. It is not the first time we've seen these armed groups show up.
If we don't get a handle on this, you're going to see it again. When you've got armed people who go into state capitals and you see this sort of thing, and it's being even like touted by some members of the media, even that say that somehow that's okay. I mean, this situation is going to get worse. And then if you have armed people on the side of the demonstrators versus people that are either counter demonstrators or vigilantes, believe me, it's a bad situation.
It's a recipe for the Wild West. Charles Ramsey, let's hope we don't get there. It's good to have you on. We appreciate your wise words.